Hello and welcome to this session of ENT, where we are going to discuss the just concluded MCI screening exam. From the ENT point of view, most of the questions were simple, and the better part is the good news is that all the questions of ENT, all they came from the notes, from the class notes and app that I've made. So if you have attended my DBMCA class or seen the app, there should be no problem, I'm sure, as far as ENT is concerned. Absolutely, completely from the notes from the class. Absolutely, 100%. Now let's see. So this is the topic of the day, MCI exam 2021 ENT discussion, and I'm your ENT faculty, Dr. Sanjay Agrawal. Right. Now let's see the question. One of the question was that a post-COVID patient presented with black discharge from nasal cavity on examination, a black nasal mass extending into the orbit. Most likely cause. Is it tumor? Is it nasal polyps, acute bacterial sinusitis, or mucormycosis? Now, if you remember, in the last session that I had, even the MCQ session that we had, I very repeatedly told you that they are going to ask you at least one question from mucormycosis in nose. And this is the exact question, very similar question. I told you that this is the kind of question they're going to ask you: nasal discharge, post-COVID, something like that, and mucormycosis is going to be the diagnosis. They might even give image, I told you, which would be a blackish tissue in the nasal cavity. And lo and behold, we have a question right from here. I even made a YouTube video on mucormycosis, and there also we discussed everything on mucormycosis. Again, I had repeated that don't miss mucormycosis. You are going to get a question from mucormycosis, and we stand vindicated, right? And what is the answer? The answer is mucormycosis, and we all know it's called black fungus, isn't it? And uh, it's a fad now. It's in news, right? And there are two things that happens which leads to mucormycosis in COVID patient. One is COVID infection. Patient starts having steroid, and steroid increases the immunity of the patient. And mucormycosis is a fungus which is an opportunity fungus, and therefore it attacks the nose. And from the nose, it can go to either the brain or the orbital. Rhinocerebral orbitomucormycosis. Remember the term that we have been using? And we also discussed the treatment like amphotericin B is the main thing. And I told you, you must know the dose of amphotericin B. Of course, they did not ask you this, but in future exams, they can certainly ask you the treatment of choice, the dose of the drug, everything. But this is a very, very important question. And we are all expecting this. And I'm sure everybody must have done this. Second question. Identify the lesion as is shown in the image. We always show you the images of the oral cavity with this kind of patches, and you can see there are white patches in the oral cavity here, almost the entire thing. Is it erythroplakia, leukoplakia, Fordyce granules, or Koplik spots? And the correct answer is leukoplakia. Now, leukoplakia presents as white patch in oral cavity mucosa. It could be on the tongue, like it's shown here in the image. It could be on the buccal mucosa also. And the main thing about this patch is that it is a pre-malignant condition. Erythroplakia, on the other hand, if I talk of erythroplakia, which looks very similar to leukoplakia, except that it is more reddish in color. And it is also pre-malignant like the leukoplakia. What is Fordyce granules? Fordyce granules are hypertrophy of sebaceous gland, of oral cavity, they are benign condition, and Koplik spots. They are seen in which disease? This is a very important MCQ. Koplik spots are seen in measles. Right. So very important choices. All these terms are very, very important. You should know them, and you should also be able to identify these conditions if you get an image of these things. It's a very popular, these are very popular diseases, especially the first two, leukoplakia, erythroplakia, extremely important. Then we have next question. In which of the following condition is the B type tympanogram seen? It's a very straightforward. I'm sure everybody in every lecture, every MCQ session, every short sessions, this is a must. We always discuss this. Is it in serous otitis media, ossicular dislocation, normal ear, or osteosclerosis? And the answer is A, serous otitis media. In serous otitis media, we get B type of tympanogram. This was the question. In ossicular dislocation, we get AD type. In normal ear, we get A type. And autosclerosis, we get AS type. And there is a C type, which is seen in station tube blockage. Isn't it? And if you remember, not only did I give you all the names, all the types, I told you that in tympanometry, we use 220 hertz frequency. And I'd also shown you images of tympanogram. If you remember, I shown you images of tympanogram, different type. How does A type look? How does AS? How does B look? How does C look? You remember? I'd also shown you audiometry types like Cahart's notch and deep at 4000, acoustic deep. Along with, just after that, we discussed tympanometry. We had discussed all these things in great details, if you remember. So if you had attended those lectures, there's no reason why you'll not get this right. So pretty sure that everybody got it absolutely correct. Next one. Next is, which are the following X-ray views shown in the image? So this was the similar kind of an X-ray was shown. Is it Cardwell's view, Waters view, Pierre's view, Race view? And the answer is, this is Cardwell's view. And I'm sure that you know how to differentiate all these X-ray views. I've shown you in the classes. In the image also, I've shown you these images when I gave you images of for MC exam. And I told the difference between Waters view and Pierre's view. Remember, Waters view and Pierre's view, there is some difference. And I had also shown you what is the difference. One is mouth open. Pierre's is with open mouth, and Waters is not with open mouth. So, and Race is lateral oblique view. Lateral oblique view. And this is a Cardwell's view, which is antero-posterior view with 5-degree angle. And this is the best for frontal sinusitis. Frontal sinus is seen best on this. Now, last year also they asked a similar question. Last year they had giving the name of Cardwell's view, and the question was Cardwell's view is best for which sinus? And the answer was Cardwell's views are best for the frontal sinus. This time they give you the image of a Cardwell's view, which should not be difficult for you because we have discussed this in the lectures and I've shown you the image also in various platforms. Isn't it? Right. Next one. Which of the following conditions causes white membrane in the throat? Now, this particular question, some students tells me that this was asked in the exam. Some say it was not asked. Doesn't matter whether it is asked or not. Now, one thing I want to tell you is, see, these questions that I'm framing or any of the faculty is framing in any subject, we don't attend the lecture, the exam. So we do not know the exact language of the question. We do not know the exact image, and we don't know all the choices. We get all this from the feedback from you students. So if you give us a correct feedback, we can get the correct question. And if you cannot recall the question correctly, then there might be some mistake. So maybe this is a disclaimer that maybe the question that we're talking about may not be exactly the same. So whatever you tell us based on that, based on our knowledge also, we try to frame those questions, and most of the students, most of the time, we do not get all the four uh, choices. Sometimes we get two choices, three choices, and rest of the choices we fill in from, I have filled in from my own good judgment, so that you get a correct question. So if there's any, you think any correction in any question, then you can let me know on my WhatsApp group, or even in DBMCI platform, so that we can make corrections in that. Right. So whether this question is asked or not, not very sure. But out of these four conditions, if I ask you which are the four condition causes membrane in the throat, the answer is diphtheria. Now, there are four or five conditions which can cause membrane in the throat, and one of the very important causes is diphtheria. Then we have membranous tonsillitis. So the name itself tells you there is a membrane, so membranous tonsillitis. Can you recall any other condition that can cause membrane in the throat, like Vincent's angina? Although in the lectures we don't give you all the names because we want to keep it simple, but here I'll give you more names. Vincent's angina. Then we have uh, infectious mononucleosis, and etc. etc. There are a few more like candidiasis. So these are some of the conditions that will cause membrane in the throat. Then next question, again, image of the PNS, and they are asking you to identify this mark structure. Is it maxillary sinus, frontal sinus, ethmoidal sinus, or sphenoid sinus? And there is no doubt, I'm sure, because I've shown you in the exam, in the classes, in the lectures, how to identify various sinuses in X-ray and CT scan. I show you the CT scan also. So this is maxilla, this is frontal sinus, this is sphenoid, isn't it? Now this is mento-occipital with open mouth. And what view is this? This is PRS view. This is not Waters view. This is PRS view. In Waters view, there is no open mouth. We have discussed this. I've told you in the lectures. I've told you in the TND session also that the difference between Waters view and PRS view is that, can you see this is open mouth? So this PRS view, it is not Waters view. And through that open mouth, you can see the sphenoid. But the question was not about sphenoid. The question was this one, which is maxilla. Now, why is this important? Is I've seen a video where a faculty was teaching the same thing, and this they said is Waters view, which is wrong. It is not Waters view. And this faculty was not an ENT specialist, belonging to some other specialty. And that's why I say that never read or attend a lecture given by somebody who's not a specialist of this subject. They are going to make mistakes. Even if there is one question goes wrong, out of your rank will change dramatically. Right? So these are the kind of things that you have to be careful of. Never read a book not written by a specialist. Never attend a session or a lecture not taken by a specialist of that subject. So be careful of that. So this is what is a PRS view with maxilla as the question. Next question. Very simple, straightforward. A 5-year-old child in Delhi has fever and the neck X-ray is shown with thumb sign. Most common organism causing this. And we all know this is epiglottitis. So basically, they're asking you the most common organism causing epiglottitis. This same image I've shown you many times. Everywhere I've shown you this image in the lectures, in the images, in the TND. Get question on this. This one and stipple sign. Everywhere we tell you about this, and we tell you about epiglottitis and croup. And usually, what I do is I compare the two. I make a column epiglottitis and croup, and how to remember all the points. If you remember, if you attended any of my lectures, you'll know that all this is discussed in great details. This image is shown prominently. I keep telling you, you have to remember this image. You have to remember this image. It's a very popular image, very important image. And lo and behold, it is here right in the exam. Right. Now, this is a question which is slightly controversial, I must say. Now, see, this is a 5-year-old child in Delhi has fever and the neck X-ray is shown. So what is the answer? Now, many will say it's Streptococcus pneumonia, and many will say it is influenza, Haemophilus influenza. Now, it depends on how you look at this. This is slightly controversial question. Now, what is the controversy? There's a book called Nelson's Book of Pediatric, and also Scott Brown's ENT 8th edition. Now, these two books will tell you that Streptococcus pneumonia is now the correct answer. And they'll say this is because there is a very active immunization against H influenza, and therefore H influenza has become a very uncommon pathogen causing any disease, which is true. It is true worldwide, but it is more important, more truth in the Western country, America and Europe country. And both these books, whether it is pediatric book, this one Nelson's, or Scott Brown's 8th edition of ENT, both are Western book, Western authors. So they are writing everything from the perspective of the Western country. But how many Indians have been immunized against Haemophilus influenza? Very, very few. You know this. You must be knowing better than me from your PSM that although we have vaccines against influenza, but it is not given in hospitals, government hospitals. You don't get it free. You have to purchase it, and it's a costly vaccine. Poor people cannot afford this, and India being a poor country, and because it is not available in government hospitals easily, so most of the kids against H influenza have not been vaccinated, and therefore in India, H influenza is still a very common pathogen, right? So if they ask you, if they do not say Delhi or India, mention Delhi or India, then of course Streptococcus pneumoniae. If they just ask you which is the most common pathogen causing epiglottitis, without doubt you will say Streptococcus pneumonia, because this is, it means on the international level, world level. But if they ask you which is the most common pathogen in India causing epiglottitis, then the better answer would be Haemophilus influenza. And because this child is from Delhi, from India, then maybe H influenza is a better answer. But if I don't know, as I said, we are not very sure of the questions that we get. It depends on how what you tell us. But if in that question India or Delhi was not specified, it was just a question about epiglottitis with this image, then of course Streptococcus could be a correct answer. So depending on the language of the question, both are potential correct answers. So you have to be mindful of this fact. Is are they asking just the pathogen causing this disease, or the pathogen causing this disease in an Indian patient? That will make a difference. That might make a difference slightly. So be mindful of this fact that in India it is H1N influenza. Otherwise, overall it is of course Streptococcus pneumoniae, beta hemolytic. Right. So it's slightly controversial, isn't it? So next one. A known diabetic lady presented with discharge from the right ear for a few weeks and now has facial palsy. Otoscopic examination showed granulations in the tissue in the external canal, most likely diagnosis. Is it safe CSOM, unsafe CSOM, serous otitis media, or malignant otitis media? If you have attended my lecture, you will have no problem. Straight away, you know the answer. And I give you the exact question in the TND also. In TND, the question was almost similar. The language, everything was absolutely the same. As if from my TND class, they took this question and placed it. And the answer is malignant otitis externa. Remember, I told you in malignant otitis externa, the three key things are diabetes. What do you look for? The three things. The patient must be diabetic, then uh, granulations in the external ear, and facial palsy is common. This I keep telling you in all my lectures, and see, all the 3 points are given in this. So I'm absolutely sure that you'll have no problem answering this question, malignant otitis externa. In malignant otitis externa, as I told you, granulations in externally, isn't it? This word I tell you, and this is what is given in the question also, external ear. But in unsafe CSM also there's granulation, but this is granulations in middle. So this is what you have to be careful about. Are they talking about granulation in the external ear, or is it granulation in the middle ear? So if it is middle ear, then of course it is unsafe CSM. But this is external ear disease, right? So malignant otitis externa caused by Pseudomonas. So remember actually 5 criteria in the class for malignant otitis externa. Pathogen has to be Pseudomonas, patient has to be diabetic, nocturnal pain, severe pain in the class, black discharge, granulations in the ear, and it's a refractory disease, the disease that does not respond to treatment very easily. So we have done all this in great details, right? Next question. Which of the following is the most important artery supplying of the tonsil? Tonsil branch of facial artery, ascending pharyngeal artery, ascending palatine artery, dorsal lingual artery. Again, I highlight this point in the class very, very much. I tell you that because tonsil has 5 arteries, which is the fifth one? The fifth one is descending palatine. These are the 5 arteries they supply the tonsil, but the most important artery is the first one, tonsil branch of facial artery. How many times do I tell you in my lecture that in anatomy of the tonsil, the only important thing is to remember all the 5 names. And I keep telling you that because there are 5 names to remember, that's why it becomes a potential question automatically. And I tell you, remember all the 5 names. I tell you that remember the most important artery, the most common artery in the tonsil is the tonsil branch of facial artery. And I show you the image also. Sometimes I draw the image, a diagram, and show you sometimes not, sometimes I do. But names I always give, all the 5 names, and I tell you, I highlight this word. And at least 3 times I tell you in every lecture that you have to remember all the name, you have to remember all the name, have to remember all the name. So straight away, simple. Next one. Which of the following nerve is responsible for earache after tonsillectomy surgery? Is it glossopharyngeal nerve, vagus nerve, mandibular nerve, or magnum nerve? Again, if you have attended the lecture, you'll know the answer is glossopharyngeal nerve. So usually the word that I use, referred pain to the ear from the tonsil, referred pain from the ear in styalgia, remember? And I tell you that from larynx, the referred pain is due to vagus nerve, dent nerve. From oropharynx, I tell you, oropharynx means tonsil, styloid process, and base of tongue. Remember, we have ninth nerve, and from TM joint and anterior 2/3 of tongue, it is V3. V3 is mandibular nerve. And this I keep telling you, even in the TND session, we had a question on this. Same question. It was not tonsillectomy, it was tonsillectomy. Again, the same question. It was almost the same question from the TND class. And in every lecture, I tell you all these things. So again, if you have attended, you know this answer. And this is what I keep telling you. Next one. A trumpet blower has neck swelling, and the X-ray of the neck is shown in the image. Most likely diagnosis. I don't think anybody will get it wrong. Everybody knows it. Laryngoscele. It's not bronchitis. Laryngoscele, isn't it? So I tell you in the class that if there is a trumpet blower with neck swelling, without thinking you say laryngoscele. This is what I tell you in the exam. That this image I showed you, this was also shown in the image session the images that I given you, the image had this particular thing, and I told you that if you have a question of neck swelling like this in a trumpet blower, it's straight away laryngoscele. So no, you don't have to use your mind. And second thing I told you is if you do not get this image of the neck and they don't mention trumpet blower, they only show you this kind of images, then how do you differentiate a laryngoscele from bronchial cyst or thyroglossus cyst? And one other thing I told you, this is the cyst. In laryngoscele, this cyst will be continuous here. Can you see this continuity with the larynx? So this continuity is only seen in the laryngosyle, ciliary of the larynx. So there is continuity with the larynx. The bronchial cyst and the thyroglossus cyst, they do not have connection with the larynx. So if you do not know, if you are confused because if trumpet blower the term is not used, then you might be confused. And then this is laryngosyle in the CT scan, and it is connected to the larynx from here directly. So that's how you differentiate. You know this. Next question. The area shown, we're showing this area lies between which of the following muscles? Is it middle constrictor, inferior constrictor, superior constrictor and middle constrictor, thyropharyngeus and thyropharyngeus, or interarytenoid, thyroarytenoid? We all know this is Killian's dehiscence. Again, I show you the image. Remember? And through this we have Jenker's diverticulum. And the answer is thyropharyngeus. Both are part of inferior constrictor. And I keep telling in the exam, in the lecture, that from the hypopharynx, this is the only important part. In hypopharynx, remember, we discuss nasopharynx, we discuss oropharynx, we discuss larynx, but hypopharynx we don't discuss. And I tell you, in hypopharynx, the only important thing is this Jenkins diverticulum and Killian's dehiscence and nothing else. And I've shown you the image also, the same image which I've shown you. So, and I tell you these two names, very, very important names, these two muscles, both are part of inferior constrictor, and the gap between the two is called Killian's dehiscence. So again, a simple question for you, I'm pretty sure. Next one. A child presented with hearing loss in both the ears. Hearing aid was tried, but that did not benefit the child. What is the next treatment option in this child? Is it a bone-anchored hearing aid, tympanoplasty, brainstem implant, or cochlear? Bilateral child not responding to hearing aid. So if the child is not benefited from the hearing aid, then you cannot give a hearing aid. This is out straight away. Tympanoplasty is never done in a child, it is done in adult, and unless you diagnose, tympanoplasty is done in CSUM. So that is a different discharge, perforation, everything. So obviously it is out of question. And brainstem implant is done for 8th nerve disease. Brainstem implant is for 8th nerve. It is called retrocochlear disease, by the way. Remember, we discussed cochlear and retrocochlear, and I've shown you the image of cochlear implant we discussed in detail. I show you the image of cochlear implant also, the child with cochlear implant, how to differentiate from Baha. This is Baha. I show you both the images and the indication of cochlear implant. It is through round window. Remember, through round window and into where? Into scala tympani. So all this we have done. So you know this. It's a very simple question, actually straightforward question from the exam, from the lecture. Then we have, if the following laryngeal cartilages does not undergo calcification. Laryngeal cartilage, we discussed so many things. In laryngeal anatomy, I tell you to remember 3 things. Remember again and again, I tell you laryngeal cartilages, muscles, their nerve supply, and their function. These are the 4 things I tell you. Laryngeal anatomy is very vast. It takes many hours to complete, but I tell you, focus on 4 things: cartilages, muscles, the nerve supply, their function. Well, guess what? We have 2 questions from laryngeal anatomy, both are from here. One is from the cartilage and one is from the muscles of the larynx. So which of the laryngeal muscle does not go under calcification? The epiglottis, isn't it? Because epiglottis is the elastic cartilage. And these are hyaline cartilages. So one more question on laryngeal cartilages. So I'll discuss a few more things there. Elastic epiglottis is the correct answer. And you must have got it right if you have attended the lecture. You'll know this. This is another question, which is the unpaired cartilage. Again, always make a column unpaired cartilage, and then I give you the names of unpaired cartilage: cricoid, thyroid, and epiglottis. And also paired cartilage, I give you the names of paired cartilage, that arytenoid, thyroid, and cuneiform. So unpaired is among this list is the first one, which is the thyroid cartilage. Unpaired cartilage is the thyroid. Cartilage. These are the three unpaired. So only thyroid is given in the choice. Right. So very simple question, straightforward from the lectures. In all the lectures, we discuss these things. Then this is also very, very important, which is the abductor of the vocal cord. Is it lateral cricoarytenoid, posterior cricoarytenoid, interarytenoid, or cricothyroid? Posterior cricoarytenoid is the correct answer. We have only one abductor. Remember, this is how I make a column: one abductor, four abductors, and two tensor. The main tensor is cricothyroid. Remember, this is how I. The only abductor is PCA. I call it PCA. Remember, in the exam, in the classes, I tell you PCA, and this is PCA. I tell you, remember PCA. It is always easy to remember. The only abductor. And I tell you, remember two things. This is what I tell you in my lectures, that remember two things. If they ask you abductor of the vocal cord, then you say PCA, which is this question. And if there's any other question of muscles of the larynx, then you say cricothyroid. You don't have to remember anything, just two things. If it is abductor, you say PCA, otherwise you say cricothyroid. If you say this without even reading the question, 99% of the time you'll get it right. If you 100 question, 99% of the time you'll get it correct if you say this. And this is the shortcut I tell you to remember. And this is the same question here. Exactly the same thing they've asked. Then next one. A child is born with cleft palate. Which of the following congenital defect results in this outcome? Non-fusion of medial intermaxillary processes, non-fusion of lateral intermaxillary processes, non-fusion of medial and lateral nasal intermaxillary processes, all of them. So what is the answer? The answer is A. Let me tell you a little bit about this one. This is from the developmental anatomy of the nose. So nose develops from nasal placard. This question is actually from pediatric. This is a pediatric embryology question, and it is also discussed in surgery, because surgeon is the one who is going to do the surgery. I just took it because it was very related, so I thought I'll take it. And medial maxillary process. So medial maxilla means two maxilla, left and right. So it is called intermaxillary. So left and right maxilla have medial process. They will meet with this nasal placard, and that is what forms the palate. And if this defect is there, if the fusion is not complete, then there is a gap, and that gap is called cleft palate. Right. So you can look up this in embryology of the palate. There you'll find this one, or in surgeon, because the surgeons are the ones who will repair this surgery. So this is not an ENT question. I just took it by the way. Then most common cause of stridor in neonates, straightforward, very, very important. Everybody knows the answer, and the answer is laryngocele. So laryngocele, most common cause of stridor. This is the first line that we talk about, isn't it? In newborns. Remember, this is the first line I tell you, the most common cause of stridor in newborns, neonates. And omega-shaped epiglottis is the other. And I also show you the image of this. And the only third thing I can do is treatment. Remember, treatment is reassurance. Reassurance is the treatment. So same question, exactly the same question was I tell you in the exam. There were 3 points you have to know, and one other point have been asked. So that's how you get it right. So this was this the last question. Yeah, this was the last question. So I have covered all the potential questions that were asked in your MCI exam, June 2021. If, as I said, this is what I got from you guys feedback. If there's anything that I've missed, please let us know so that we can discuss those points also, or any changes you want to make in this, because it all depends on what you get. So we'll make changes. And with this, I thank you for joining this session. And from this platform of eGurukul and DBMCI, all the best for everything in future. Thank you.